Well, hello.
Hi, y'all.
How's everybody doing? Good, 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 good. So we're going to have a great conversation about this book, Are Bisexuals Just Greedy? We're going to get an answer to that question sooner rather than later. But just so we know, I am looking at the clock here behind me, and when we get to about 20 minutes, 15 minutes towards the end, I'm going to ask Chanel to start roaming around with a microphone. Chanel's right over there. So that folks can ask questions here. So if there's a question that you've got that's burning, we're going to get to you. And so just be prepared and maybe just kind of jot that down if you don't want to forget it, because we definitely want this to be a conversation with all of us and not just me. So we heard your bio.
Yeah, an
Very
embarrassment
impressive.
of riches.
Right? I was wondering if they were going to make me read a bio, I was just going to be like, no, just let it be introduce yourself, because that's just embarrassing.
No.
But fun, but
Yeah,
embarrassing.
it's
Yeah.
great. Just say I'm the female bisexual Mr. Rogers, you know, and that'll
There
do.
you go. There you go. That would have been a very different show.
Yeah.
So let's just kind of start with the book. When I described this book to folks who said, you know, what are you doing on Wednesday? And I was telling them I was going to be here and how exciting that was. I described your book as a warm and witty explainer of all things LGBT. Is that fair?
That is perfect.
Okay.
Like, I couldn't want a better description. Thank you.
Great? Yeah, I mean, but it
I
does.
nailed it.
Yeah, good. But it explains a
Yeah.
lot. There's just a lot of stuff that needs explaining. So, who's your target audience or target audiences?
Gosh, like, has anyone else here published a book or gone in this realm? Because whenever you're a filmmaker or you're a media maker, and that is the question, it's like, well, who's your audience? You know, and you cannot say everybody, even though you want to meet everybody. But I would say the audience is the subtitle, like anyone who has a question about what it means to be LGBTQ+, and that includes the LGBTQ+ community, and it includes the non-LGBTQ+ community. I kind of have this image in my head that you're at Thanksgiving dinner, and there's that very well-meaning family member, you know, might be like an uncle or something, and they typically pop off like the most, you know, offensive question without trying to be offensive. And you're so tired of explaining something or talking about it. And it's like, well, here's this book, and there's a chapter describing exactly what that is or explaining it in less than 5 minutes, and you're done, and then you can serve dessert. And so it's like, but there's also people that are coming out to themselves as well. And I also feel like, as somebody who's middle-aged, yes, I'm nearly 46, so I came out about 20 years ago. And back 20 years ago, we were still talking in very binary language. And so I can think of many friends who for a long time, decades and decades, have labeled themselves as lesbian or gay and haven't ever had the opportunity to think beyond that binary as well. And I find many of my friends who have those labels are now questioning themselves, like, what does non-binary mean? Like, what is cisgender, and why is it important for me to label myself as cisgender? And like, what's the difference between bisexual and pansexual? Like, there are people within our community that are asking those questions as well. So,
well, the language is changing all the time,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you can't ever
gorgeous.
say, oh, I got my queer card, so now I just understand everything.
Yeah.
And, you know, 2 years later, something is going to come along. I mean,
Correct.
if you, and we both do diversity, equity, inclusion for a living.
Yep.
And, you know, people, if someone had told me 5 years ago that people would be having arguments about, you know, what their pronouns are, I would have
Yeah.
been like, no, that's not a thing. And now it's a thing.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just, you know, things change, and you can't ever say, I'm done learning.
No, never. Like, I actually had to get this book published ASAP last year because I realized if I waited any longer, it was going to be out of date. You know? So it's like, grab it now while it's
Yeah.
hot, because in 2 or 3 years' time, it's going to be out of date and there's going to be another version, you know?
And yet, you know, I mean, it's like, we are universal and we are timeless, right? I mean, you know, so we talk about, you know, non-binary. It seems like this new thing. Is it? I mean,
No.
haven't non-binary people
Hell
been
no.
around
I
forever?
have a chapter in the book about that. It's like, one of the chapter titles is being non-binary just cool these days? And the short answer is hell no. It's always been cool, and we've always been non-binary. It's like pre-colonization. There were always multiple not really definitions, like some definitions, but the language wasn't there because it was just kind of accepted that there was this spectrum. You know, the binary models of masculinity and femininity came into place a few hundred years ago. Whereas in many cultures around the world, indigenous people, like they never had these structures. And so, no, it's like I'm so excited that 1 in 5 Gen Z identifies as LGBT because this generation is refusing to stay in these buckets. And I think there's a liberation that's happening. And of course, that's very scary for some people, but we need to find a way to make it less scary so that people aren't hurt.
And so do you think that 1 in 5 people have always been LGBTQ plus or more?
I think 98%. Like, I don't know. Well, in fact, GLAAD came out with a study, like the 98% just sticks in my head because this week GLAAD came out with a study saying 98% of Americans think that LGBTQ plus people should be able to live their lives freely. And again, I think that there are a lot of people who identify as straight, and I would never put a label onto someone else. But I think that there are people who've kind of been put in a straight bucket that actually, if they were given the freedom to be able to express the spectrum of gender and sexuality and understand it at a deeper level, then they would identify with our community more as well. So, yeah.
So sometimes I hear people say, we're talking a lot about language, and there's so much in your book that is, and have I read the, yes, I read the book in one sitting. I mean, it's so easy to just devour.
It's about 5 bathroom visits.
That's a long bathroom visit, sure. But
well, you know, I think you have my dad here. You know, it's 5 dad bathroom visits.
Okay. You know, so you just end up in the bathroom a long time because you're just still reading, because it's fun. But so much of it is about language. It's about let's define this word, let's define this term, and And it just kind of made me think as I was reading it. There are people in my life who are just like, I don't like labels. Do you have to label each other? Like, don't label me.
Yeah.
And yet, we can't really talk about this stuff without labels. So do you have a take on that? You know, aren't labels just bad?
No. Labels are not bad. I completely respect and understand the frustration with having to label yourself, because that's the level of having to explain yourself and like being put in a box, even if it is like a non-binary kind of box or off the spectrum or whatever. But labels really help because they help us communicate. And that's why we have language. And I've always loved words. Like, you know, I love a thesaurus. Like, words are so sexy to me. So I think that labels help because they help us find community. So, you know, I identify as bisexual, but the word pansexual and queer is also greatly comfortable for me. I choose bisexual because there's a B in LGBTQ+, and we have not been recognized for the majority that we are in the community. And currently there's a lack of funding for BI+ communities and BI+ healthcare needs, and we have poorer disparities when it comes to our healthcare rates, for example. You know, Health and Human Services, they came out with a study this week as well, and you'll see that if we don't have those labels, then we can't be counted. Like, we need labels for data to be able to prove that we have higher rates of suicidality, that we have, you know, poorer healthcare needs. And so if we don't have that label, then you can't do statistics to be able to meet our needs. And then, of course, it comes in building and finding community. You know, I'm part of, and there's one of my dear friends over here, hey, Nicole. We have this new coalition called the BI+ Organizing US, and it's a way of bringing BI+, meaning the big umbrella of that, with BI, PAN, M-spec individuals to be able to come together to be able to empower us. And if we don't have those words, then we can't find each other. And so I think eventually we might come to a position in the world where the labels are less important because we actually have equity. But until we have equity, we need the language to be able to communicate with each other.
Yeah. When I came out of the closet, when God was a boy, as they say, there was a whole lot of conversation about, you know, well, there's events for gay men, but no lesbians come. There's events for lesbians and gay men don't come, and the two communities aren't mixing. And that's just the G and the L. You know, do you ever feel like we've gotten now 2S LGBTQIAA+? Is that like, is the community, are we one community?
Well, before I answer your question, I have a quick question for you, Eric. When you came out the closet, what labels did you use to describe yourself?
Gay.
That's it. Gay,
That was
gay,
it. Gay
gay,
man.
gay, 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 gay,
Gay
all
man.
the way.
I mean,
Yeah.
it was just, I was a gay man.
Yeah. And so I think that coming out the closet, per se, feels different today because the spectrum of our gender and sexuality has kind of been recognized at a greater level. And so what was your question again? Sorry. Like,
Well,
what do I feel like?
Are we one? Sometimes
No.
are we one
No,
community,
who
or
thinks
do we
we
just
are?
have a common enemy? You know what I mean? I mean, politically, there's an absolute reason for us all to band together.
Yeah.
Do we have enough in common to kind of keep the alphabet soup of us?
Yeah. Our queer community, and I'm going to use the word queer as an umbrella term for one label to bring everybody under the fold. I realize that one label may be leaving some people out, and I hope that you feel welcome too. But I don't feel that our queer community is not a monolith. Like, imagine human beings are like icebergs, right? And only 10% of an iceberg is ever visible above the surface. But underneath, you have this delicious 90% of an iceberg that people can't see. So most of our personal identities on how we feel on the inside and how our personal life experiences affected us is beneath the surface. And so that's true for all people, including queer people, including straight people. And I think our movement for equity has changed so much because we're kind of expanding in this way. And think about, I don't like to bring politics into my conversations. However,
We live in interesting times.
You have to understand that not all queer people vote Democratic, and that's okay. Unfortunately, we live in a binary political situation as well, where you've got either Democratic or Republican, and that's your only choices. I hate binaries in all manners, right? But you can't assume that a queer person is going to vote the same way as you, in the same way they're going to want to have, the same future as you, and so we've got this polarization, internal and external, of the queer community. And I think that in order to solve this problem, queer advocates and queer leadership working at a political level and a policy level for our equity has to change their language and step out of this. Stop saying fight hate and stop attacking one political organization and instead promote love and listen. We've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we should be listening more than we should be telling somebody else what to do, because in all of these media hits, and I don't want to bring up corporations, but we're in Pride Month and corporations are getting attacked, but people of various political beliefs support those organizations, and we're just increasing that conflict. When we say, we're in a crisis and there's a state of an emergency, we're not really helping people. And I live in Texas, as you can tell from my accent. But we're fueling the fear. We're pouring gasoline on people that are already afraid. And that doesn't solve the problem. And so I've kind of gone off on a tangent on trying to answer your question. But can you tell I'm really passionate about this?
Sure, yeah.
And no, we're not cohesive. And as a bisexual woman, if I'm on a date with somebody whose gender expression is very different from mine, then I'm assumed to be straight. And I've had experiences here in DC when I've gone to a queer bar and I've been sneered at by a self-professed gay man for being in a bar that he doesn't see I belong because I look straight. And, that's BS. So anyway,
Yeah.
that's how I feel
No, you're
about
allowed
that.
to. Yes, absolutely. So I'm wondering if you might do us a favor and
Yes.
read something
Okay.
out of the book. You had picked a chapter, I think.
I did. I mean, there's 21 chapters. They take anywhere between 3 to 6 minutes to read. It was very difficult to choose which chapter, but I've decided to go with the very first chapter, which is what's the difference between cisgender and transgender? So before I read this, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands because I don't want people to have to self-disclose, but if somebody said to you, could you explain what the word cisgender is? Think to yourself, could you do that? So this chapter is kind of dedicated to my mum, who died 17 years ago yesterday. God bless my mother, of pancreatic cancer. And the very first 2 words are my mum. So here's for you, mummy. Okay. My mum, Jane, she, her, was the eldest of 4 daughters born and raised in London, United Kingdom. Her maiden name was Top. And so, by the way, when you read it, Top is spelled with 2 P's, okay? So it's T-O-P-P. Her maiden name was Top. So when they were teens, they were known as the 4 Tops. Get it? As in the Motown group of the 1960s. It's quite amazing to think that an all-black male vocal quartet could be compared to 4 white British girls growing up across the Atlantic, all because of a common name only distinguished by 1 extra P. Mum's younger sister is Claire, she, her. She's my Auntie Claire, and also my godmother. Claire has told me many times that I'm the whole reason why she had her first child. When she held me as a baby, she thought I was so cute and felt so much love for me that she had to have one too. She wanted to steal me from my parents, but knew that that wouldn't fly. So instead, she got pregnant at the age of 18 and gave birth to my cousin, Nick, he, him. Claire sees my Facebook posts from her home in England, so is well aware of my advocacy for LGBTQ plus people, and especially transgender people like my friend Kate, she, her. Kate is a transgender woman from Honduras who, like me, is an immigrant to the United States. With Kate's willing participation, I've been sharing her story as a way of educating, entertaining, and inspiring people to understand what it means to be transgender. I know Claire is accepting of all people and follows my work closely. But when I asked her if she understood what the word cisgender means, she wrote back, "Cisgender means moving from male to female, apparently." Apparently, Claire's Google search was not helpful. So, to my amazing godmother, Auntie Claire, and any of y'all who would love a definition, let's break down the difference between the words transgender and cisgender. Now, this is going to be bare bones and binary, y'all, so hold on tight if this is not news to you. Right now, when a baby is born, they are assigned a sex at birth. Some people are born with a vagina, and some people are born with a penis. And some people, about 1 in every 100 people born in the United States, are intersex, meaning that they have any variation of male and female sex tissue, chromosomes, and hormones. So currently, the baby's genitals are used to proclaim, "It's a boy" for a penis, or "It's a girl" for a vagina, and we assign this label for the baby's gender. But the label we assign isn't true for everyone. This practice is not only scientifically inaccurate, it's actually proving to be quite dangerous given all of the ridiculous antics people are up to in gender reveal parties. I mean, people have died at freaking gender reveal parties. Just search "died at gender reveal parties" online and you'll see. Plane crashes, exploding pipe bombs, and forest fires have all been to blame. And I'd love to know if anyone has actually booed at the puff of pink or blue that's revealed. I mean, what's going to happen? A disappointed sigh if the unwanted color is a surprise? I mean, I get being excited about having a baby, but why on earth are we putting a brand new human into a box with a bunch of expectations before they've even had a chance to breathe out of the womb? Just have a bloody baby shower, for goodness sake. Because a gender reveal party is actually a genital reveal party. It's saying, "Yay, our baby has a penis," or "Yay, our baby has a vagina," and completely overrides the fact that the baby's genitals may be unclear and or intersex. All we're describing is what the baby's junk looks like, which is kind of personal information to be sharing with the world. Because sex is between the legs. And gender is between the ears, i.e. wired into our brains. Most people grow up feeling that their gender, which is in their heads, is the same as their sex, which is between their legs. So they don't even question it. The label for this is a cisgender person. Most people in the world are cisgender. And as Auntie Claire knows from changing my nappies, that's diapers to y'all Americans, I am cisgender. But some people grow up and come to realize that even though they have a vagina, their brain knows that they are a boy. Or even though they have a penis, their brain knows that they are a girl. The label for this is a transgender person. And transgender people, or anyone who is not cisgender, have to dig deep to realize that it's society that's wrong. and then find huge courage to express their true gender to the world. Which is why, as an ally to transgender people, I choose to be out about being cisgender. When transgender, also known as trans, people are expected to label themselves, but cisgender, also known as cis, people are not, we're saying that cisgender is the benchmark for normal and transgender is not normal. But in fact, neither is normal. They're just different. Like the 4 tops with 1 P or the 4 tops with 2 Ps. Cisgender just happens to be more typical than transgender, but we have to talk about both in order to create balance in society and not bucket a group of people as outsiders or others. So, Auntie Claire, and all of y'all, my dear friends, Kate is a transgender woman and I am a cisgender woman. We are both women and have the same gender in our heads. We were just born with different genitals between our legs, and that's very personal, so you can stop thinking about our private parts now. Thank you very much.
There you are. So you see what I mean? That's a lot more fun than a Google search. So thank you.
There's a lot more. And it's very binary. And so I want people to understand that this is the very first chapter. And so it's starting at a place where people know nothing. And it graduates to being able to explain like non-binary and intersex and so on and so forth. But I just feel like you have to start a place of assuming that when people know nothing and they just want to understand. So make it funny and then build up from there.
Yeah.
Hopefully you thought it was funny.
Well, and you said before, you know, that even people within the LGBTQ plus community, queer folks, we don't know everything about everything either.
No.
A lot of it's because we aren't a monolith and there's a lot of difference in between our community, and it's very easy for us to assume that whatever is true for me must be true for you,
Right.
even maybe with the best intentions, but we get it wrong all the time. One thing that I've always felt about our community, and I wonder if A, you agree with me, and if B, if you have any ideas or solutions or anything about this, is that we don't have a lot of intergenerational contact
Yeah.
in our community. We compare us to most communities of color, where you are raised by people in your community, you know the elders, they're part of your family. We don't really have that as much. We tend to raise ourselves. We find our peer group, and then we lean on each other's shoulders and we kind of get through it. And that may be part of the reason why we don't know as much about ourselves as others. I mean, does that resonate with you? And if so, what do we do about that?
Yeah.
How do we get the elders to talk to the youngins and the youngins to talk to the elders and mix it up?
I think it partly resonates with me. I've had the fortitude to be able to speak to different people of different generations, but before I get there, I'll start with that we're not born with a manual. And I think oftentimes when you come out or you start to realize, oh, I'm not 100% straight cis person, that there's this assumption that you can explain it all to yourself and to other people. Like a lot of my work with trans military dear friends, where for about 7 or 8 years I was sharing stories of active duty trans service members, and I'd already come out as gay. So I came out gay in 2004, came out as bi in 2012, and worked on trans military from that time. I got to learn and understand the difference between cisgender and transgender because I made friends with people in the trans community. And during that time, a lot of our service members were doing a lot of advocacy work and a lot of speaking about what it meant to be trans, and I found they didn't know how to tell their own story. We don't know how to tell our own stories oftentimes, and we have to try and figure it out. And so I think there's that's part of it, where you're expected all of a sudden be a guru because you're LGBTQ+, and so therefore you have to be the educator of everybody, which is ridiculous. And then I think that, with technology and people are finding themselves in different ways, I'm a self-professed middle-aged woman and I have an aversion to social media. But social media has been extremely powerful for the queer community. And I know there's a whole bisexual following on TikTok that, I'm just like a dinosaur with a video on YouTube 10 years ago, And so I think that that's probably added to that in the same way it has to other communities and not just the queer community. But I hope that there's also that opportunity to change as well, where the technology can actually bring people together. And from a bisexual perspective, you know, the person that started the Pride Parade, her name is Brenda Howard, and she's known as the Mother of Pride, and she's a bisexual woman. And so there's been a lot of erasure of non-binary gender and sexuality identities over the years. You know, it came out of the gay movement and then the gay and lesbian movement, and then slowly B and T was added. And I think that is really cool to feel like that. I think there's a revolution, but more of a quiet revolution coming on, you know, of people realizing that there's a spectrum. So I don't know, I think there's opportunity for us to all get together intergenerationally as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's important, but it's so,
Yeah.
it doesn't happen very
No.
often. It's just, you know, yeah. it's
You've
frustrating.
reminded me, actually, if I can add to this, because I was at a party, like a tiki party, about 2 months ago, and I have friends of all different generations, and I was talking with some friends of friends who were women who identify as lesbian, and they're probably in their mid to late 60s, and I got triggered because it was the typical, like, you know, dismissive of bisexuals and like trying to defend my identity because there's this stereotype of like, well, a bisexual woman's just going to leave you for a man anyway, and, you know, and lesbians don't want to date us and all that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, those things are still said. But I did my best to hold back and not get too upset, but I certainly got really passionate about it. I'm like, look, we as an older generation have a responsibility because the younger generations need a safe space and they need to be seen and valued. Mm-hmm. And like, they're breaking this binary, and we have an opportunity as elders, you know, to like part the waves and make it easier for them. And so I encourage people of all generations, but especially my generation and above, to see here's a really great opportunity to like help people. And, you know, the future is very queer, and we all just have to get on board with that.
Yeah, rock on. You have kind of an afterword in your book about, you know, how to be the best ally ever. And it's got some of the best advice I've ever seen on it, which I'm just going to quote directly from the book. Don't be an asshole.
You remember that?
I mean, just don't be an asshole. But as I read that, I something that I talk a lot about in my work is kind of the difference between intention and impact. And so you can have really good intentions and still mess up.
Yeah.
What are some ways in which people that, in your experience, with really the best of intentions, just are doing it so wrong?
Aw. I always like to focus on the positive. But like I'm trying, doing it, people with best intentions doing it.
But I mean,
so
you know,
well.
people who mean well, but are just saying things that are just, oh, don't say that anymore, please.
Oh my God,
Or
where do I
do that
start? Can we start with hey guys?
Sure.
Oh my gosh, it really, and I get a little microaggression with hey guys like a million times a day. Okay, I'll come back to hey guys. First of all, in the is steps towards allyship. So it's realizing that you don't go from 0 to 100 of allyship. Steps towards allyship, and it's 4 steps. Number 1 is know yourself, and that's for all of us. It's like question our own gender identity, our own sexual orientation, our own biological sex. Like, figure yourself out first, because the second step is know others. And you can't relate or understand similarities or differences to other people until you've done the work on yourself first. So know yourself, know others, be kind, and be courageous. And the kindness is the empathy and the listening, and to go beyond, like once you've done the work on yourself and others, like just being able to create safe spaces. And then be courageous, that's the action step, and is where you're standing up. So, for example, I did an interview with somebody for a film project. They're non-binary, they, them pronouns, and they were telling me about how in the workplace, if somebody uses the wrong pronouns for them, how triggering it is, and how it just sends them into a spiral, and they can't focus at work, and it's just, a lot of mental health. And mental health challenges are very relatable for people of all communities, all human beings. And they were saying that when somebody uses the right pronouns for them, just in an average situation, it's like having a warm hug. But they said the next level of that is when they find out that someone else has corrected somebody else on their pronouns and they weren't even in the room, then that is an extra warm, big hug. And so with pronouns, I know that's the most common thing where people are like, oh my God, it's so difficult. Like, I'm trying to learn. And the thing is, it's like, if you mess up on someone's pronouns, just don't make a bigger issue about it. Don't go into, oh my God, it's so difficult and I'm really trying and everything. It's just say, I'm so sorry, use the wrong pronouns. These are the right pronouns. Carry on, because, we subconsciously are reading cues because our society has said, when I hear a voice that sounds like that, I tag it to that pronoun, right? And that's psychology. That happens. But it's a matter of like building your own self-awareness to be able to recognize and correct yourself. And like once somebody has given you their pronouns, it's being able to make a mental note and only seeing that person tied to those pronouns and then realize those pronouns are going to change over the time, as it has happened with my other friends as well. So I would say that, the biggest thing is when you're trying to be an ally, but then you make it about you when you mess up. We can just ignore that. With the hey guys, there's a chapter on why we're saying hey guys when there's a room full of women, and I go into this whole history lesson of England. Like, has anyone heard of Guy Fawkes? Have you heard of November, the 5th of November, jump out of trees and pot? I mean, it came about in the 1600s when some dude tried to blow up the Houses of Parliament, and his name was Guy, and now all of a sudden, because of colonization, we say guys to everybody, and it's just like, pet peeve, if we can just eliminate. Say y'all is the best word in the world. Y'all, team, people, friends,
I do folks
humans.
a lot. Hey, folks.
Hey, folks.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, hey, guys. And my friends, like,
Because ladies and gentlemen doesn't really work anymore
no,
either.
it does not.
Yeah.
No, because there's more than 2 genders. There's like 1 billion genders. We don't even have labels for all the genders. Like Facebook came up with 69, and even they can't get it right. Like two-spirit individuals lived on this land that, I should have looked up, to be able to do a land acknowledgement, because forgive me, I haven't remembered the DC land acknowledgement, but like this land was occupied. We occupied it. Thank you. And so it's like just being able to acknowledge that and be aware of that, build your own self-awareness. I think the world would be so much better if everyone just meditated for 20 minutes every morning, and that would fix everything.
That's planned. So we are on the stolen land of the Piscataway tribe.
Yeah.
Patuxent's further down. Yeah. Okay.
In Austin, we've got about five or six, and so typically I'll read them because my pronunciation is embarrassing. So I try my best.
So we're going to move into that thing that I was talking about before, where we're going to take some questions from y'all.
Thank you.
Hey.
All of y'all are open to questions.
So Chanel's ready with the mic. Who has got a question burning? I see one in the back.
Hello, Fiona, random stranger.
Hey, Nicole. It's great seeing you again.
So the question I have for you is, so going back to the point earlier where you were saying get the book while it's hot. So
yeah.
So would you say since you've released the book, would you say it's still hot, or just based on what you've learned since then, do you feel like, okay, second edition coming tomorrow? Like how are you feeling now with what you have now?
Thank you so much for asking, and thank you for
welcome.
being
I love
here.
you.
Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. No, I think it's probably good for another 5 years, probably. Like there was even a few things where I was like, oh my gosh, I should have expanded that word more. Like instead of saying this and or this, like, I think I should have said, like, any of these. Like, there's a few different places. And also there's this, self-criticism self-criticism as well. And I'm like, oh, my gosh, what are people going to think? Because I also do state in the introduction, I know I am not infallible. Like, anyone can disagree with me. That's absolutely great and fine because, it's impossible for me to be the authority on this. But what I will say is that I did a lot of research and backed it up with facts and studies, and also a lot of it is anecdotal as well, where I'm not explaining something that I don't have firsthand experience of without sharing someone else's story. So part of the chapter, it talks about gender dysphoria. And as a cisgender person, I have not experienced gender dysphoria, but my editor is transgender and has experienced it. So actually in the writing, I'm like, I haven't experienced gender dysphoria, so I'm gonna hand it over to my editor, Gus. Hey, Gus, over to you. And then Gus like writes in the book, like doing an analogy, and he's like, so that's my best explanation of gender dysphoria, Fiona. And then I'm like, okay, thanks, Gus. And then, continue on, And so I do feel confident enough where you can give it to that Uncle Ted and know that you're not giving that uncle a BS Google search, It's like, it's more than a BS Google search. Maybe I should have that. And I would love to do another one, probably, about 3 to 5 years, yeah.
Okay, we had another question over here.
Emily.
And then,
So Fiona's a friend of mine, just full disclosure. But you changed my mind on what bisexual meant several years ago when we had a conversation, because I had identified as bi and felt like that meant I like guys, I like girls. Very binary, because I'd only ever dated cis guys and cis women. And then I met my wife at the beginning of her transition, and she was in this very kind of in-between place for a while and was like, wait, bisexual feels way too binary. And so we spoke, and you explained the either or part of it in a way I would love to hear you articulate, where the bi doesn't mean male or female. Yeah. So I'd love if you explain that in a second, but also I thought it was so interesting because I think I told you I started using queer because I was like, I kind of had to let go of my old baggage, growing up. That was such a bad word, and I kind of got over that. Now I love it because, any of us who are a little older, that was just such a playground slur. And now I've finally kind of come to embrace it because it's so all-encompassing, but then I do sometimes have those moments where I want to reclaim, we've talked about this, but it was interesting. We have a friend who was staying with us this past week, same exact situation, and this is a therapist who specializes in working with LGBTQ people. She lives and breathes this world. Same exact thing, always identified as bi, only dated cis males, cis women. Is currently dating someone who's trans and was like, oh my God, bi feels too binary. I think maybe I'm pan. But I just thought it was so interesting. This is years after I had that talk with you, and people are still figuring out what does it mean. So I guess I'd love to hear, why is it still feeling problematic to some people, and how can we change the definition? But also I'd love if you gave your definition, because that really literally changed my perception of it.
Okay, thank you, Emily. Okay, hopefully I can answer this correctly. So the definition that I typically give, bisexual, so Latin comes into all of these words, right? So bi means two in Latin. So bi means the same as or different from. So I have the capacity to be attracted to somebody romantically and or sexually, to somebody who is a similar gender to mine or a different gender to mine. So that's where the two thing. Pan is Latin, and it means all. So a pan person typically would say they have the capacity to be romantically and or sexually attracted to of any gender. So the way I see bisexual and pansexual is like they're non-identical twins. For me, bisexual and pansexual and queer feel accurate for my capacity. I've also recently started saying gender is not a potential barrier to my capacity to be attracted to somebody. And then, of course, you have to go down into attraction is love, romance, and sex. And so there's an illustration in the book of like an attraction box where you've got those 3 dials and you've got a pin, and those pins could be anywhere or off completely the spectrum. So I don't want to go down the asexual rabbit hole, but asexual means that you have little to no sexual attraction to somebody, but you could have high love or romance, or you might have low love and romance or high sexual. It's like all these different things. And so you can be straight and asexual. You can be bi, pan, queer, lesbian, gay, all the things. Anyway, so there's also a chapter in the book that the question is, which label is better, bisexual or pansexual? Well, the bottom line is, no pun intended, the final sentence is whichever label feels great for you, that's good. Just use that label. I personally say bisexual more because there's a B in LGBTQ+, and I want to be an advocate, and so that's why I'd primarily say that. But pan, is also great for me as well, and queer. in the chapter about trying to explain the difference between bisexual and pansexual, I use the analogy of cherries. And so Bing cherries are the most common cherry used in cherry pie. And so it's kind of like straight people will only go for Bing cherries. And I can't remember, lesbian, gay people go for different kinds of cherry or whatever. And then with the difference between the bisexual and pansexual is like bisexuals might like Bing cherry and one other. They might Bing cherry and two others. They might like Bing cherry and many others. Or they might Bing cherry and goodness knows how many others because they haven't tried all of them. And how could you possibly make a decision? And then pansexual have the potential capacity to like any of the cherries. You know, so I kind of like feel that if pansexual had come about in our lexicon before bisexual, then maybe bi was great in its time because back then we were talking in binary language and it was like we as a community only saw gender as two labels. So it's no wonder that it started there. But look at like language has evolved since cave people. You know, we didn't have the language today that we did thousands of years ago. So I think that pan is a great word to keep evolving. But because B is there, like we can't let B go. Yeah.
And also, it's important to remember that a pansexual person is not attracted to everybody.
No, none of us are.
You know?
In the same way, straight people aren't attracted to everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's like, but some people are, and if they are, that's great.
Yeah.
Or like some people are attracted to nobody, and good on them.
I am.
And we're like, make life a lot easier. I mean, I'm still single, trying to find the right person. I've got to work on my own shit first.
By the way, I saw a great T-shirt the other day on the beach that said, "Queer is only bad if you think normal is good."
Yeah.
And I thought, ooh, there you
Yeah.
go. We had a question over here.
Thanks so much for that little debate right there. I was also having a conversation with my friend last night at dinner, who is the epitome of left-wing liberal white man, and asked me a question of, so isn't bisexuality, you know, like kind of discriminatory to pansexuality? I have to sit and explain everything, and I couldn't. And I came up with like, well, in bisexuality, I take gender into account. As in like, I'm more attracted to trans men than cis men. And pansexuality is like, we fuck everyone. Does not matter who they are. Okay, that was to the debate. But my actual question comes from something you were talking about, and that's intergroup, intergenerational community finding. And I'm an immigrant too, and I, in college, take classes with a lot of immigrant professors who are straight up feminists and find community in the LGBTQ community too, because we have commingling identities, but we had a discussion about how the recent increase in trans women in sports has become like, I don't know how I feel about that. Not me, as in my professor. And I'm just like, well, we are the same. We're fighting for the same goals. And then she brought up a great point. It's just like, well, women have been fighting for their categories, and now we finally have them, and now they're taking it over. So in a sense, they're not recognizing trans women as women. But then there's a whole chapter about that. But I'm just like, how do I make feminists who are, self-proclaimed feminists in our group who are supposed to fight for each other together, explain to them that we are the same?
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a loaded question.
Is that the question? So is the question for Eric?
No. The question's definitely for you because you wrote a whole chapter about it and I did not.
So the question is, how do we help educate people on why trans women should be included in sports? Particularly to those people that we thought were on our side. You should know better. I know, so I live in Texas, I live in Austin, and I've been to many hearings and volunteering with Equality Texas. Please look at Equality Texas's social media, by the way, because they've got great animation explaining a lot of these things. And it's so painful because you're listening to these testimonies and women have been fighting for equality and but they can't get it out of their heads that biological sex is different and they just see trans women as men who are taking over their sport. So yes, I hear you. I think that when trans people are given the health care that they are afforded, trans women have a less likely chance to compete against cis women in sports. The other thing is, for the past 17, 18 years, trans people have been able to compete legally in the Olympics. If trans people had an advantage, they would have been winning gold medals a long time ago. The first trans person to win a gold medal is a non-binary person on the Canadian soccer team that won a gold medal, last year or the year before, okay? So first of all, there's no example of trans people overtaking sports, even though they've been allowed to compete for decades. When trans people, again, have healthcare and hormone therapy and their basic needs are met, they can't compete any better than cis people. And what happened was, in Florida, there was a swimmer, and she just happened to beat one of her, one of the women on her team, right? And so, that was the first time she'd beaten her. The cis girls had been beating her for years, and then she happens to win, and then it's a big, media splash, and then she goes back to not winning again. So it's just, there's no, evidence to support that trans people have an advantage. Going back to the Olympics, there was a trans woman competing in, what was that, lifting?
Powerlifting,
the powerlifting, right? She didn't even qualify. There's Chris Moser, who's the triathlete. He's been competing for years, a trans guy. And this is the other thing. People are so focused on trans women, they're not even thinking about trans guys who are, competing, against the cis guys. So it's just so unfounded. And what happens is that people get fixated on biology and then a lack of understanding and knowledge about biology. Hopefully, did that answer the question a little bit? I wrote about it.
Data. I mean, the answer is data, right?
That's the answer. And in the book, there is data and references as to why it doesn't back up. It's really sad to me. Because, you know what? Don't we want to live in a society where people's mental health is met, and sports brings people together and camaraderie? Most people are not competitive athletes. Most people do sports because they have to in school. I hated hockey. Oh my God, it was the worst. And running, okay? So most people are doing sports because they want friendship, they want to improve their physical health, they want teamwork. It's sports help cisgender people form friendships and celebrate wins. It's that's why we do sports. I mean, isn't it meant to be about the taking part rather than who wins? And trans people are not really winning in sports. Yeah,
well,
oh my God. I would love, oh my gosh, I would love to talk to J.K. Rowling.
Okay, so we are almost done, and I saw a question here and a question there. So those are going to be our last two questions of the event, and then we're going to be hanging around. She had her hand up first. So we're going to do three questions, and then we're going to give you a chance to come and get your book signed by Fiona and ask your question to her personally. How about that?
Fiona and Eric, I just wanted to ask you guys to comment on the violence that a lot of LGBTQIA+ people experience when they come out, whether that's violence from their family, violence from their community members, and violence from systems that try to keep them silent. Do you have any comment on that?
I have comment in that, yes, it's horrific. Yeah. And I think that especially black trans women. In fact, again, I live in Texas, and Dallas has the highest murder rate for black trans women in the country. And I think that it comes down to racism and misogyny. And I think that the more we can do to help bring people into an educated understanding of what it means to be LGBTQ+, and realizing that being queer isn't taking anything away from you. It's bringing a broader perspective of what it means to be human. And, yes, we've seen high rates of politicians bringing in anti-LGBTQ+ legislation. But what we have to remember is that this current time is not going to last forever. And we're going through a conflict in the world right now where knots are trying to be undone, right? Like there's significant change and people get scared with change. And the best thing that we can do is to get as many positive, empowering, educational, entertaining stories out into the world so that you can decrease that fear and people can see themselves in our community. You know, those that are attacking us are subconsciously reacting from fear. And that it's so subconscious that they're not even aware of that's why they're pushing back. You know, when you see pride, you know, marketing and brands and big corporations are being attacked for being woke, that comes from a level of fear. And so anything that we can do to make people feel included rather than dividing the country with us and them, I think is what we have to do. So no, I don't, I do acknowledge that that's there, but I feel like it's also a calling to help and to not add to it by fear-mongering and making people more scared. Yeah. You're welcome. Thank you for asking the question.
Hello, thank you. My question is actually related to this question, which is that, I loved how in your beginning remarks you acknowledged the breadth of, the lack of monolith in the queer community, you know, the breadth of, the way that we cut across a cross-section of all of society. But because I also know Fiona quite well, and
reasonably
love her beautiful soul. How would you address the fact? How do you sort of navigate the tightrope, right, where we want to reach out and talk to and welcome and try to break down the fear of anybody who's willing to listen, but also acknowledge the fact that we live in a time where the unprecedented in my lifetime, you know, levels of legislative attacks and things like that, and authoritarian sort of power grabs that are scapegoating queer people, are largely driven by a, you know, far right white nationalist political party. Like, how do we acknowledge that truth without like turning off Uncle Ted from, you know, being interested, being receptive to the conversation, or, you know, how do you sort of walk that tightrope?
Yeah.
It's not easy.
I think it is not easy. Definitely, it's not easy. And I think that there are steps to it. And I think the first thing we have to do is put our own face mask on first, you know, to use that common analogy, where you have to do your own self-care and your own mindfulness, and you have to acknowledge how stories externally and then also in your mind, like our minds are great storytellers, and when you sit and listen to your own mind will feed fear. And so you have to acknowledge that what is going on inside of you. And then I think back to, like, again, I go back to Equality Texas and this work that we're doing. One of the animations we made was sharing the story of a family that had to leave Texas because their 7-year-old trans girl felt like, she asked her mum, she goes, am I gonna die? And her mum was driving and she stopped the car and she goes, no, why would you say that? And she said, because everybody here hates me. And that's because of these, you know, the political legislation. In fact, Emily Schilling, I missed it, but gave an incredible speech at the Pentagon the other day that you were telling me about, and saying that, you know, when the new trans ban went into effect and that 31 people, what do I say? I don't want to give a warning, but died by suicide. And then when the ban was ended, it was 3 or 5. But anyway, her speech is online. It's incredible. And so what I want to do is, first of all, acknowledge that the fear is real. I don't want to wash over not to be afraid. But what I really want to focus on is that when you have leaders that do empower us, that we're all happier and, you know, we're all better off. And I also want to acknowledge that while right now it feels like this is never going to change and this is the new normal and it's always going to be like this, is not true. Like, we're going to get through this. Like, the president of the Austin LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce gave an incredible speech the other week and was saying over the last 3 years, there was a total of about 340 anti-LGBTQ bills that were put into the Texas legislature. Okay, so it started off with 60-something in 2021, and then 80-something in 2022, and then 23 it was 140. Okay, out of those 3 years, a total of, let's say, 300 and something bills, 5 passed, 98% failed. 98% failed. And so, but what happens is we focus on the 5 that passed. And yes, they're bad, and we're going to change it, but 98% failed. And I believe what you focus on is what you get more of. So if we want equity, let's focus on equity. Let's focus on love. Let's not focus, let's not acknowledge or dismiss the crap, but let's focus on what we do want more of. Because you bring other people into the crowd that way, and the work that I do often with DEI is personal storytelling. So instead of using divisive language, I focus on the emotion of somebody, because you might not know what it means to be LGBTQ+, but you know what it means to be isolated, to be afraid, to be ostracized. You also know what it feels like to love, for the most part, because we're all born to love. Most people have felt some kind of love. So focus on what we have in common, because that's how we can, bring people together, because that's my solution, because the more we focus on the negative and how different we are, then the worse it gets.
So I think we have one last question.
Thank you. I appreciate the time, too. I know we're getting close. Something you said earlier about the comment that I think you said a gay man had made to you in a bar made me think of a really great anecdote from another bisexual author. Her name's Jen Winston. Book's called Greedy.
Hi, Jen.
Love it. She mentions in the book that there are no bisexual bars. And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on in my experience, complete lack of bi-specific or bi-exclusive places where bi folks can go and, be together.
First of all, I'll say every bar is bisexual.
True that.
Bisexuals are 56.8% of the LGB community, and I think we're probably 90% of the straight community. So I think bisexual bars are everywhere. But your point being that no, they're there's not a label for a bisexual bar. And sorry, the question was where do we find community? Is that what you're saying? Or yeah, it's a thing. I will go back to Nicole is one of the people that's involved with me with this bisexual, it's Bi Plus Organizing US, which is a coalition bringing Bi Plus organizations together. In fact, this month is Give Out Day, or during the month is Give Out Day, and there's 300 to 400 LGBTQ organizations that are receiving funds. 5 of them are specifically bisexual. So if you can help those bisexual organizations, please go give what you can, even if it's just $1 to Give Out Day. Where do we find community? I think that I recently have only really been finding community through this coalition and realizing that there are bi plus people out there, but we do find it harder to find each other. But the reason I'm hesitating is because I don't think I'm a good example, because of my age. I came out when I was 27 as gay, and had I known then what I know now, maybe I would have come out as bi earlier. And I'm seeing on social platforms, people are finding each other. I think that we're going to see in the next 5 to 6 years, bi is going to be the cool label, the bi pan. I was at DC Pride last weekend, and having been to Prides for nearly 2 decades, it was way queerer than I've ever seen. It's all of a sudden everyone wants to be bisexual, and I'm yeah! So and also I think that bars brought community at a time when social media wasn't around, and that was the safe place for people to find each other. But bi people were in that bar too, but they weren't seen. And so I think that there's probably a way, like I remember back like 15 odd plus years ago, living in Houston, going to the gay bars, and the amount of shit that I would hear spoken about by plus people. And, you know, if say you were dating somebody of a different gender, and you're like, oh, the straights are in here, you know, that kind of stuff. And that, I think that language is beginning to change. So I think maybe there could be a place where we don't need to move anywhere else because we're already there. And we're going to start seeing each other. We don't need to start a new bar. We don't need to do something new. We just need to be visible where we're already at. There's my conclusion. Thanks for helping me figure that out.
Thank you so much, folks. Can we, a big round of applause for Fiona Dawson.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.